What's up, everyone? My name is Alex Bass, and I'm the host and producer of the Life is a Tour podcast, where I have candid conversations with my BIPOC colleagues celebrating and navigating their journeys through the music industry. On today's episode, I have a brilliant guest. She is a musician, an arts administrator, and a music educator. She's a director of operations and programs for the Trombone Shorty Foundation, an adjunct professor at Loyola University and Xavier University. She's a curriculum writer and recently wrote for Take Me to the River New Orleans, which was released via Berkeley Pulse, and Embracing Arabic Popular Music in the Classroom, released by F-Flat Books. She's also worked with arts organizations such as Preservation Hall, Artist Corps New Orleans Jazz Museum, New Orleans Jazz Orchestra, and Upbeat Academy. And if she's not busy enough, she's also the board president of Folk Alliance International, national trustee of the Recording Academy, board member for Decolonizing the Music Room, board secretary for Second Line Arts Collective, and she's also a trombonist and vocalist who's performed with notable musicians such as Aretha Franklin, Alan Toussaint, Jimmy Buffett, Teresa Anderson, and has her own projects, the Marina Orchestra, the Asylum Chorus, and Brass Band Brass Band. Please welcome to the show, Ashley Shabankareh. My girl, you're busy.
Way too busy.
How
I have no
do
chill,
you keep it together? Clearly.
A really well put together calendar
Okay.
and at least 8 hours of sleep a night.
Good copy. First of all, thank you for being here. I am so excited to chat with you. Let's take it back a bit. How did we meet? I feel was it like COVID times where we really connected, right?
COVID was when we first really connected because I knew your name because you had done a tour with Pres Hall like years ago, but I only knew your name. I only had your email address. So I never met you in person. My best friend was on that tour with you and she was like, Alex is dope, dude. She's so dope. And then we met in person during the pandemic and the pandemic brought us together. That was the first time we actually met.
And it was crazy because I was like, who is Ashley Shabankareh? I was like, but I feel like I've emailed her before, but I never put the pieces together. But I've always heard amazing things, and it is very clear you are a rock star. And I'm so happy to chat with you today. So let's just jump right into it. I really want to talk about these boards that you're on, right? So just to take it back, board president of Folk Alliance International, national trustee of the Recording Academy, board member for Decolonizing the Music Room, and board secretary for Second Line Arts. Can you give us a little snippet of what these organizations do and the purpose of the boards, and why does this matter for the industry? And I feel like that was like a loaded question, but
there's so much to unpack with that. I guess first we'll start out with what some of these organizations are.
Okay.
So Folk Alliance International is a membership-based organization that supports the folk community, specifically folk music, and all of those who surround it and support it. I would say that folk music as a genre is perhaps the most unlike any other genres that I have ever worked in before in my entire life. You see a much more supportive radio DJ community. They're supportive in getting artists out there. The venues have such a different energy and vibe. It's incredible. You have house concerts that are really integral in that scene.
Yeah.
And then the artistry overall can just range in a broad spectrum because folk means people. So it's really music of the people.
Right.
And so what that means for each country that it is a part of is so vastly different. And also recognizing there's so many more BIPOC creators within this space that aren't always recognized in that context because folk music is so vast that people try to place them into other genres.
Right.
So that's Folk Alliance in a high-level nutshell.
Love it.
The Recording Academy, folks know because it's most synonymous with the Grammys. And as I continue to learn more and more as I work from a board level, really just discovering how much more in tune with advocacy efforts they are in terms of advocating for the music industry as a whole, being the largest contingency of music creators, and making sure that voice is represented in policy decisions, especially as we recognize our national government likes to integrate itself into things. And let's see, what else did I miss? Oh, Decolonizing the Music Room It is all about really amplifying BBIA voices, Black, Brown, Indigenous, and Asian voices within the music education community.
Okay.
And they have been super integral, really coming in and helping folks understand how to decolonize and dismantle some of these really racist practices that were happening in classroom spaces. Huge shout out to Brandy Waller Pace, who is the founder and executive director. She is a badass and really has amplified this work, not just in Dallas, Texas, and Fort Worth, where she is based at, but in a much larger spectrum for music education.
I love that.
And yeah, and then last but not least was Second Line Arts Collective, and they are really all about two really big areas supporting young people as they really start their journey as jazz musicians
Mm.
and providing music industry context in it, and then also supporting what I like to call the itty bitties, like
Yes.
the 1 to 3-year-olds with
Yes.
like appreciation and love. And so they really support that broader spectrum of music education. But yeah, so those are the organizations that I serve on boards for. And I feel like it's worth noting and naming and acknowledging that when you're on a board, you are not getting paid.
Good
Nonprofits in the United
copy.
States,
Okay.
you do not get paid to do any of this work. So it's really a labor of love that you're
Okay.
doing when you jump into these spaces. And at least with nonprofit organizations in the United States, when you serve on boards, it's really around providing a duty of care. One of the biggest roles that you serve on is fiduciary oversight of the executive director. And then also just making sure that like these decisions are sound and secure as they connect back to the mission of the organization. So it's almost like you have the executive directors on one level and the
Okay.
board oversees that executive director. So it's like this weird top down thing that's happening, but you should always be in checks and balances with each other.
Of course. So, how did you get into these boards? What made you be like, you know what? I think I want to be a part of this board. Like, what is the decision process here? How did you get here on 4 boards at that?
I know. It's funny. Like when I first started out serving on boards, I remember I got asked, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is such a big deal," and I had no idea what went into boards at that point in time. So, baby Ashley, like if I went back into the past and tell baby Ashley something, it would be like, "You're actually going to do a lot of work for free, and so you should really like what the organization is."
Right.
And or feel like you can provide some sort of positive impact or change in some kind of way or capacity. So a lot of the times it's usually someone approaches me. I'm going to be honest, I have never applied to join a board. People have reached out to me and asked me
Okay.
if I would consider it, and I have said no to a lot of people. I'm not going to deny that. But the ones that I say yes to, it's usually because I really feel a strong connection to what on earth is happening in the work,
Right.
or I'm recognizing that they're doing a lot of deep work within Black and Brown communities,
Mm-hmm.
or the other big one being like, I really just feel aligned with what the mission is itself. And
Right.
so there's like a lot of flowchart decisions that
Sure.
lead me to saying
So the Recording Academy, that's a recent one for you, right?
totally.
Congratulations. Can you tell us a little bit more about what happens on that board? I feel like more people know more about the Academy, at least a little bit more than the other
Yeah,
organizations.
yeah. So previously I served as a chapter governor.
Wait, let's rewind. What's the purpose of the Recording Academy? Let's start there.
I feel like I should actually bring up the actual mission statement because I feel like that would be impactful for me to
Uh
do.
huh.
Yeah, and I don't have it memorized. Why? Because you just put me on the spot with that question. So, the Recording Academy itself is all about the way that they frame it is around recognizing excellence in the recording arts and sciences,
Hmm.
cultivating the wealth of the music community, and ensuring that music remains an indelible part of our culture. And so it's all about advocacy, celebration, and education. Those are the
Hmm.
three big pillars in that context. And in terms of how the actual Recording Academy, like how this all kind of comes together, if you're a Recording Academy member, and the way that you become a member is you get two recommendations, preferably from someone that is in the Recording Academy already. You get a nomination, They go through this whole process of reviewing. And so you have to be a member in order to be a trustee or a chapter governor. And those are the two areas of leadership roles within the Recording Academy. I previously served as a chapter governor, and chapter governors, there are different chapters in the entire Recording Academy. There are in New Orleans specifically, we are part of the Memphis chapter.
Okay.
And so our region extends much bigger than other regions, goes pretty deep. I like to think about it as everywhere that follows the Mississippi River, that is where our chapter is. So that kind of gives you a good context. Stretches all the way up to Kansas City. Yes, we have Missouri, we have Arkansas, we have parts of Tennessee, not all of Tennessee. We have Louisiana, we have Mississippi. We like to say that we have the most fun chapter of the entire US.
See
But of
that.
course, we're biased.
It's not biased if it's the truth, okay?
I mean, it's the truth. I mean, let's be real. It's the truth. So the chapter governor space is like the first area that you can come into. And that's more of an advisory board. And it's like people from the community that are advising on things that our community needs. Like we really are providing that influence of these are things that are really supportive for our membership. Here are some things that we can be doing. These are ways that we can amplify it. And that might take the lens of advocacy work. I got to say, our chapter tends to be the model of some of the deep advocacy work that's happening around the US. For those that aren't aware, the RAP Act is where in court cases, prosecution cannot use an artist's lyrics to prove their guilt. And one of the really big key people in that advocacy process was Mac Phipps. And it was incredible to have him as a part of that process to really help make sure that law went into effect. And we're seeing other cities trying to replicate that same model.
Right.
Absolutely incredible. Similarly, the Allen Toussaint Act, which basically ensures that someone's likeness and songs cannot be used in commercial use after their passing without permission from said family, which is another huge one. So we're seeing that pop up in other states as well within our chapter. But we've seen a lot of really great advocacy work happen as a direct result of our community members, which is so awesome. So anyways, I went on a whole tangent about advocacy.
No, I love this. I love it. Please continue. Tell us more.
Oh my gosh. Oh, of course, there's education as well. So there's a lot of mentorship with young people, and we have huge concentration of universities and programs within our chapter in particular that have young people that are connecting into these mentorship opportunities. On a national level, the national trustees, the way that I view the big difference, we have folks that are advising within locality, providing lots more context about what those various communities need based on locality versus a national governing board that does what a traditional nonprofit board does. It oversees the executive director / in this case, CEO / president. So we're overseeing that work while also supporting in different lanes. A lot of nonprofit organizations tend to have things like a finance committee or a governance committee. In the Recording Academy case, we have things like membership and like how do we support membership. So everyone has to serve within these different spaces, but at the end of the day, we're doing some of the same exact things that we might do in other nonprofit spaces.
Got it. I love this. It's all very important. And obviously, if you want to get into something like this, you have to really be intentional about why you're stepping into these spaces, because like you said, it's hard work, but it's also work that you're doing essentially for free. Do you ever feel some type of way about that aspect of it? Because to me, and we've talked about this in the past, right? The free labor of it all, right?
Yeah.
How do you manage those feelings when you're in these spaces, knowing that you're doing a good thing, right? You're giving back, but at the same time, like it's your time, it's your energy, it's your mental, it's your emotional, like it's all the things. So how do you deal with that?
With folks serving on boards is you tend to have like folks in one of three categories. Folks that are there to provide their time, folks that are there to only provide their wisdom, and recognizing the two are very different things. And then there are the folks that are there to provide money, and they don't mind throwing a check at it. That is not me. I am not the last category. I am definitely the first category. I do not make the most money in the world, but if I really care about something and I'm really passionate about something, And I might not be able to donate money,
Mm-hmm.
but I can donate time that is comparable, if not greater than the money that I would have donated. In particular, and for me, I really like to support organizations with leaders who are Black and Brown. And I recognize that those particular organizations tend to receive less funding than
Mm-hmm.
those with leaders that are white.
Right.
So I prefer to provide my time and support to organizations with leaders of color because I think it's a really important thing. And so the way that I grapple with it is these are folks that I know that need my support. And
Right.
like in an industry that is already largely biased towards white people and leadership roles, if I can help them move the needle a little bit more forward towards being able to not just survive, but thrive and be able to support folks on their staff.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I tend to view these spaces of providing free labor is it's going to a much greater cause.
Yeah. Awesome. For folks, let's say they want to get into these boards, right? And you're very specific about the types of organizations that you want to support. How would you go about advising someone to find these organizations and then how to figure out who's on these boards, figuring out how they support the community? What is some advice around being an advocate, choosing a board that you identify with?
I tend to start with what are your values? Like your
Mm,
own personal values. What do you care about? What and also what is something that is like a non-negotiable that when you step into a space that you expect to be there?
right.
And that is always the foundation for I think for a lot of conversations,
Yeah.
especially things that not only the places that you work for, that you get paid for, but the places
Right.
that you volunteer for and you give your money to. You should always be thinking about what are your values at their core. There, I also think about we'll start with our values and then what are the causes, what are the things that you're passionate about?
Mhm.
If it's something that is about and for me, music education is a really huge thing that I'm passionate about.
Yes.
I'm going to think about what are these music education organizations and also who's actually doing the work in the way that aligns with my values. And so then I'm trying to seek out those spaces. Similarly, I've done work with other organizations that have been more around centered around the music industry
Hmm.
itself, not just music education, but I try to make sure that it connects those 2 dots together.
Right.
And then, I also try to look at who are folks that are really asking for folks to apply for board roles
Yeah.
or that I'm already connected with and starting in that kind of locality. So it doesn't have to be national to begin, let me be
Sure.
clear. I started out on local organizational boards, and I learned a lot about how organizations work, how good board leadership should look like and run, what it's like to be in a space that, like, upholds the values that you hold and
Right.
really commits those values in a really important manner, and that's really where I would begin. I think you can always feel it out with your gut of
Yeah.
like, if this is a good fit or not, so take the time to ask questions, like, especially because any good board process to bring on new board members is gonna have some sort of meeting where you get to meet with other board members and leadership and to use that time to ask questions
Right.
to see, do I really jive with these people? To really figure out if it's a yes or a no for you.
I love that. I want to ask another question in regards to education, right? So, obviously,
Yeah.
we're here telling folks all of these different ways that you can be a part of the music industry outside of being the performer or the singer, dancer, beat producer. What are some other roles within music education that people could look into if they're interested in music, but they also have an educational background? They're not trying to be on stage, but they want to support the arts. What are some other roles within music education that you would suggest?
I would say the number one role that I would suggest is that of a teaching artist. Perhaps like one of the most vital roles within community. Teaching artists do two really important things. A,
Mhm.
they are very much so still committed to their artistry, and so,
Mhm.
like, still have that there and in the background and, like, it's there, it's ever present. It's not like they're losing touch with that space, especially
Right.
for those folks that are in the real big artistry side of things. But the big part of the teaching artistry is that you are presenting a piece of what your craft is to a variety of audiences. So this might be that you are working with a classroom educator in
Mhm.
providing master classes or workshops, or perhaps you're hired to work with a school for a whole year to support them in things like arts integration. It could be that you are going on the road and doing this as you integrate this with your touring. It could be that
I
you
love that.
are doing Zoom classes. Like, you literally don't even have to leave your house. You
Right.
could be zooming in and providing a workshop. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of flexibility and fluidity with it. It could just be that it's a one-on-one lesson with someone
Mhm.
that's interested, and that a teacher that you're showing them how to do a new skill that they are just so unfamiliar with, but it's something that you excel at. And so the possibilities are really limitless with
Mhm.
teaching artistry. I know folks that are within the theater space and they use theater as a means to help coach people into public speaking. And I love these like little connection moments. Or there are teaching artists that literally they're just like, I play this style of music. And so then I
Mhm.
go into classrooms and I support and provide that sort of level of teaching with young people or with adults to do the same thing within these different spaces. So it could be with young people, it can be with adults, it could be with both, it could be a concert, like it
Yeah.
could be whatever. That's the beauty of teaching artistry.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that because a lot of that I was not aware of and wasn't aware of how expansive the education can be in the creative ways that you can educate and support people. And speaking of that, we mentioned earlier that you write curriculum. So I would love to talk more about your embracing Arabic popular music in the classroom. Can you tell us a little bit about
Yeah. One of my dear friends had passed in December. Their
that?
name was
Mhm.
Mia Ibrahim. Mia really was committed to teaching folks about Arabic music,
Mhm.
because it was an area, especially in the United States, that pretty much no one teaches about. And then if you search anything about Arabic popular music whatsoever, there are maybe a handful of articles that only have about 5 young people in some of the studies to provide
Mhm.
context. To also add to this, for music education, we lean a lot upon research of success of, like, how things are integrated,
Right.
and while there was a lot of great results, it was a lot of really small sample sizes, and
Mhm.
no one had any curriculum to attempt to integrate it themselves.
Right.
So after they passed, obviously their work was still there but never touched.
Mhm.
And their mom and also the publisher themselves reached out to me and were like, "Hey, we know that you and Mia were super close. We were wondering if you would like to finish the work." And I'm like, "Hell yeah, I'm all in." Had to sit through my emotions for a little bit. And I was like, "I'm 100% in. How much time do I have?"
Yeah.
And so I had 2 weeks to finish a resource so that it came out right in time for Arab American Heritage Month. It was really fascinating to essentially do a collaboration with a friend that had passed,
Mhm.
especially because it was like I had to go into my file folders in my brain to be
Sure.
like, what were they trying to say here? Or what was the intent of this like one passage? And then to build upon it and expand it so that it really was a comprehensive resource and guide for educators to get it started within their classroom spaces. So
Awesome.
it's a lot of fun. It's really looking at some of those basics. What are Arabic words that you might see? What are some
Mhm.
basic phrases that you might use, especially if you have young people that speak Arabic within your classroom, which we're seeing, obviously going to see more and more of. I'm recognizing what is happening in the world. And it also has things like here are simple dance moves. Here are artists, popular artists that you can work with or think about. Here are some song charts and examples of music that you could start using, and really embracing that side of culture because it's just not integrated whatsoever in classroom spaces.
You're Middle Eastern, right? Your background's
Yes.
Middle Eastern. How have you felt like your background has been represented in this mainstream space? How do you see yourself in these spaces?
So it's so strange because being Middle Eastern, there's just been so many moments of political turmoil that have
Mhm.
influenced not just like the ability to see myself in things, but how popular culture reflects what we look like or
Right.
are. I think about one of the first examples, and I'm just gonna give you just snapshots of pop culture is what's
Okay.
about to happen. So we have the 90s, right?
Yep.
We have Aladdin coming out. Yeah. So it's great. It's awesome. Everything's beautiful and lovely. Interesting representation of what folks look like within
Right.
these spaces. but we'll work with it. Really cool to have a Disney princess that I was like, I jive with you. I'm
Right.
feeling like I'm connected here. But obviously, very quickly, that shifting happens, right? We have the first President Bush going into Iraq. Then, of course, we have 9/11, but then we have
Mhm.
yet another moment of going into the Middle East. We have so many markers of political turmoil and war in particular that then changed the way that folks looked at brown people in particular,
Right.
specifically assumed religion and lots of Islamophobia happening, lots of assumptions of what Middle Eastern people are,
Right.
lots of comments, degrading comments of saying that Middle Eastern people are just associated with terrorism.
Mhm.
And how that shows up, and in particular, how that shows up in the music industry is that a lot of us just don't talk about our background for
Mm.
fear of being just fear. I'm just going to end that
Right.
sentence just for fear.
Right.
I remember moments with my mom right after 9/11 where she was like, if anyone asks you what your nationality is, do not tell them Middle Eastern. Just don't do that. And that was the conversation that wasn't just happening within my family, but a
Mhm.
conversation that was happening across multiple families.
Right.
And something that you still have to navigate within living in the United States, which just makes it a really difficult thing to have to be like, I want to fully embrace my culture, but I,
Right.
like, can't see it publicly.
Yeah.
It's strange. It's so
Yeah.
strange. As it relates to the music industry, you don't really hear about Middle Eastern folks within these spaces. Not a celebrated thing. It's just we're in this weird little othered category, which makes it a bizarre, really bizarre moment.
Sure. Do you feel like
Yeah.
there's any progression in that space? Are you seeing any traction within the communities of trying to get more artists out there and just being more accepting overall? Obviously, we're in the age of DI, but we also see how we go a little forward and then we end up
We take 2
backtracking.
steps back. Yes and no. I think that as we kind of progress further along and further past 9/11, and I
Hmm.
use that as the really big marker, you can
Sure.
understand why. I think we've seen a lot more acceptance. I know that there was a push, was it 2 censuses ago or 1 census ago? I can't remember which one, but
Hmm.
there's been some conscious pushes recently to, like, explicitly name Middle Eastern folks as
Hmm.
their own category on the US Census
Okay.
because we've been grouped in to these different spaces that are
Right.
not representative of being othered for so long, and there's been some great traction, and then subsequently, we've seen a lot more folks that are of Middle Eastern descent that are, like, in public eye, including the music industry as a whole. Often you'll hear Middle Eastern folks described as Middle Eastern North African. We're all lumped into one big category together,
Right.
and so we're seeing a lot more folks within those spaces
Hmm.
being represented in the music industry, being celebrated for their art forms, and so I'm feeling more positive about it, but then also recognizing that there are just the world that we live
Yeah.
in that you don't know if that's gonna be, like, how long that's gonna last for, so it's
Yeah.
like a yes and no.
Yes, we definitely have a long way to go, but I'm happy that we are here to have these conversations and to bring them to light and to make sure people are not forgetting and people aren't dismissing. We are out here, we are taking up space, and I'm so happy that you're willing to be candid and open and vulnerable with me to have this conversation. Before we go, what's some advice? One, how people can just continue to show up, right? And if you have any advice for getting into the industry, maybe specifically around education or not, because you're a musician too, even as a musician, if you have any advice for all of the wonderful Black and Brown and Indigenous people out there, what would you like to
Yeah.
share with them?
I think there's always a reminder, even though we're Black and brown and folks,
Mhm.
that we still have to listen to other folks that are not our nationality or ethnicity, right?
Mhm.
And we equally can't forget that we have to be listening and learning to our peers, even though we have intersectional experiences.
Yeah.
It doesn't negate the fact that we haven't had all of the same things or
Mhm.
understand the deep generational trauma and
Mhm.
harm that can exist within spaces. And so just a reminder of just open listening and dialogues and conversations take us a long way. And just to like root that, recognize like the collective liberation is like liberation for all.
Yes.
Just moving that forward because we're not all free until all of us are free.
Period.
And so we equally have to be championing for one another. Always. That's just how this has to work in order for things to really move forward. And then as I think about it as it relates to the music industry as a whole, the advice that I always give to the young people that I work with is start out small. Have a cup of coffee with someone that you're like, that person seems really interesting. Or
Yeah.
like just offering the act of offering to buy someone a coffee or a meal
Yeah.
to just pick the brain and learn and listen for them goes such a deep and long way. I feel especially after the pandemic, we lost sight of what connection moments are really like, and to take those moments to just savor the in-person time. And so I always give that advice in conversation. And the other big thing is just reach out to folks. Again, like just the act of reaching out to folks goes a really long way, not with an ask.
Yeah.
And I really want to emphasize, I don't go into conversations with an ask. I go usually with a just like wanting to connect.
Right.
And from those connections, that's usually where you get the most work. That's where you start to build your network. Where you start to build everything from. And I really emphasize that. I'm like, you can't just go in there hot being like, I want X, Y, and Z things. Guess what? I'm probably not going to respond to you if you send me an email like that or a text. But if you're like, hey, I want to get to know you more because I'm really intrigued by what you do and how you got to where you are, that's going to actually make me feel much more connected with you because you show an openness and willingness to learn. So it's just that reminder. Not everything has to be an ask.
That is great advice. Before we go, is there anything you want to share with the audience? Anything you're working on right now?
Oh, gosh.
Outside of the 10,000 things I just mentioned at the top of the show.
I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge or name and recognize that through my work with Trombone Shorty Foundation, we do run a music industry apprenticeship program for young Black and Brown youth ages 16 to 24. It's a paid experience. We're always here to connect with folks in the music industry. We want them to learn from you. And so if you ever want to connect or support, please, we'd love to just have young people learn from you, and would love to connect with more folks in the music industry to build a more vibrant industry, especially for our young Black and Brown folks.
Yes.
So yeah, that's all I want to share.
Thank you. This was so beautiful. Ashley, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And I hope everyone enjoyed this episode of the Life as a Tour podcast.